the millions, and we will be. Because it starts right here.
Guilty.
Welcome to Naptown People's Radio, a weekly podcast of the Indianapolis branch of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. I'm your host, Derek Ford, here with my comrade and co-host,
Dani Abdullah.
We're here to guide you through the pressing issues facing Indianapolis from the perspective of our people, not our oppressors. And as organizers involved in these issues, we're not just talking about the news, we're making it happen. On this episode, we dive into Black August, something that we are commemorating and celebrating this August, every August, and really 365 days of the year, because we know that many of our listeners might be familiar with Black August, but we want to really explore the origins of it, the significance of it, the meaning of it, both historically as well as today and for the future struggle. So I wanted to actually turn this over to Dani first by asking really if you could speak about the origins of Black August, what it does commemorate, and how and why we celebrate it.
Yeah, for sure. So first, we can't talk about Black August without talking about George Jackson, right? So George Jackson was a field marshal of the Black Panther Party while he was incarcerated in San Quentin Prison in California. So not to go into all of the details, but at, I believe, 17 years old, right, George Jackson went into a gas station, robbed the gas station. I want to say he took maybe $50. I don't even think it was that. Was it $50?
I think it was $70, but
okay.
Regardless.
All right, $70. So for $70, not even $100, he was sentenced to essentially, he was sentenced to life in prison, right? They left it up to the state of California to decide how long he would be in prison. So at 17 years old, he never was on the outside of prison ever again because he stole not even $100, right? So there's that, which I think every person who knows a Black person in America has heard similar stories of Black people being taken advantage of in the system, right? Especially Black men. So this is what happens to George Jackson, teenager, prefrontal cortex, not even done developing, not to get my therapy back, but literally decision-making skills are not there yet, right? So George Jackson goes to prison, San Quentin Prison. He's there for the rest of his life, and he ends up being assassinated. He's assassinated on August 21st. Of 1971. And one of the reasons why he was assassinated, right, was because he was organizing the prisoners there. He didn't just have his head down. He didn't just take what was given to him. He was organizing the people there. He was writing books. He was, he became a field marshal for the Black Panther Party, right? This was somebody who was politically active. I think there was almost 100 books in his prison cell when they went in and they took all the books after they murdered him. And some of these books included Martin Luther King Jr., but they also included communist literature. They included poems from Palestinian freedom fighters, right? This was a person who was out here no, we deserve freedom and we're going to get freedom, right? And so they ended up assassinating him. So again, like I said, of course, we have to talk about George Jackson, but it's not just because of George Jackson that we have Black August, although he was definitely the catalyst, right? We were okay, George Jackson was this amazing person. We're going to have Black August to commemorate him. But August is so significant when it comes to the Black Liberation movement. August 1619 is when Black people were brought here. We were kidnapped and then brought to what is now known as the United States, right? That was August 1619. August 1831, Nat Turner's rebellion happens. Even more relevant or more up-to-date things such as the killing of Mike Brown, the killing of John Crawford happened August 2014. Corinne Gaines was killed August 2016. And August August 21st, actually, 2018, 47 years after George Jackson was assassinated, there were prison strikes that happened, which include like work stoppage, hunger strikes, to unfortunately just get them to shed light on the abomination that is our prison system, right? Like, I think everybody in the PSL would agree of like, yeah, we should get rid of prisons, right? We should have rehabilitation centers, right? Prisons don't actually do anything. If you talk to any like social worker who is worth anything, at least, they will say prisons don't actually do anything. And so the significance of August when it comes to the Black liberation movement throughout history, not just with George Jackson, but throughout history, cannot be diminished in any way possible. And so today, you know, what that looks like is obviously continuing to like commemorate George Jackson and how they snuffed out his life way, way, way too early, but also to talk about, you know, political prisoners in general. It's a way to commemorate, okay, what are they doing to the undocumented people today? What are they doing to people like Shaka? What are they doing to people like Vernon? It is a way for us to pay homage to those people, but also like remind us that like Black resistance, it has never actually looked like, you know, reformist politics. It has never looked like glorifying celebrities or wealth or assimilating to the capitalist system, because Black August is a way to connect Black people and just people in general, but Black people to our history, and serves as a reminder that liberation doesn't depend on, I know people like Beyonce, I'm so sorry, Beehive, but like, does not depend on Beyonce. It does not depend on Jay-Z. It does not depend on Black capitalists, Black police officers, Black Democrats, Black Republicans, right? These Black faces in high places simply place a friendly face on the system that oppresses the masses of Black people in the United States and around the world, often distorting symbols of Black resistance along the way. Black liberation lies, as it always has, in the hands of the people. It lies in the hands of the conscious and the organized masses. And so like that studied, trained fight comes from 1619, right? It doesn't just come from George Jackson. Although, in the words of George Jackson, you know, discover your humanity and your love of revolution. That is what Black August is about.
So it's a nice, it's a nice summary. Discover your humanity, discover your revolution.
Discover your love of revolution.
Your love.
Yeah.
And, you know, speaking of the books that they found in his prison cell, we published them first on Liberation News in, I think, 2009. Greg Thomas is a scholar who was at Syracuse University, is now out in California, obtained them, like a facsimile of all of them. And I'd just like to like read a couple of them because they're, you know, I mean, it really just shows the breadth of his knowledge and his study. And again, this is somebody he was a political prisoner, but he wasn't arrested for political reasons. Of course, I mean, in a sense, he was, right? But Absolutely. He wasn't for overtly political reasons. But then he became radicalized and politicized in prisons. And so he has, you know, of course, like, I mean, a lot of classics, right? Black Skin, White Mask, Frantz Fanon. You know, he has Mao Zedong, Fidel Speaks, The Poverty Philosophy. There's a lot of Marx. Actually, all 3 volumes of Capital are in here. As well as, you know, Maurice Cornforth, who's I think a British communist, The Theory of Knowledge, works by Engels, works on Soledad Brother. And then he also had the Pillage of the Third World, the Modern Reader, the Autobiography of Malcolm X, of course, and Stalin was in there, Gramsci. Of course, that doesn't mean he, you know, endorses every single thing, right? But the Prison Diary of Ho Chi Minh, and as you mentioned, one of the books that they found was a collection of poetry under the title of Enemy of the Sun that was published by Drum and Spear Press, which I think really speaks to the internationalism and the fact that, you know, Black August is a time to rededicate ourselves to commitment, you know, in the struggle to free political prisoners of war in the U.S., but also just Black liberation in general in the U.S. and across the globe.
Yeah, I think, especially when we talk about internationalism, which, like, I feel like I talk about, actually, I don't talk about it as much as I used to, and I need to get back to it. But internationalism is so important when we do this work. because what is happening here, or what is happening in Palestine, what is happening in Italy, like it all affects the working class, right? We are so intertwined, and this system does such a good job of making us feel like that's not my problem. And so for George Jackson, somebody who's been in prison since he was 17 years old, to have poetry from, again, a Palestinian freedom fighter is amazing, especially when, you know, the system will have you think like, especially for Black people, like that don't have anything to do with me. That's something happening over there. And we are all connected. And George Jackson didn't matter if he hadn't been on the outside since he was 17 years old. Like he knew that, right? Mm-hmm. He's reading things from Palestinian people. He's reading things from Ho Chi Minh. He's reading Stalin, which is fine. But reading things from Castro, all these are not Americans, right? Like these are not Americans. And yet what they're talking about are relevant to him. What they're talking about are relevant to all of us.
And the other thing is that if you think about this is before the internet. So it's not like somebody right. took a PDF of, you know, the poems from Palestine and like emailed them to somebody who then got them into a prison. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, there's like a lot, we're talking like, you know, a transatlantic transportation. Absolutely. And then like the actual publication, physical publication, the smuggling into prison, the smuggling, you know, out of Palestine. So the lengths that we're, you know, go to kind of put our sacrifices in perspective, Absolutely. I think. And now let me ask you a question, Dani. I mean, Black August, it is a reminder, as you said earlier, that, you know, Black celebrities, Black faces in high places won't be the ones to really do anything for Black liberation, but I mean, maybe hold it back, maybe advance in some ways. What is it? Is there something about Black August and the prison struggle that's sort of like harder to co-opt, or, you know, for the ruling class to sort of make nice, right? Like whitewash, in other words, or, you know, is it just like anything else that they can? I mean, of course, there's no limits to what they can do and what they can co-opt. But is there something about Black August in particular, or what do you think?
I think that first off, Black August is something that I didn't know about until I joined the party, right? Like I actually think it was my first liberation forum was a Black August one. It was my first liberation forum. And I was like, what is this? Like, oh, it's like Black History Month for socialists. And it is not Black History Month for socialists, by the way, spoiler alert. But I think, you know, the ruling class does such a good job of trying to keep children, in particular, keep children away from knowledge and information, right? Because as we know, right, like the youth are the future, right? Like where are we if it is not for young people? And if you put knowledge in the hands of the young people, like, you know, it's over for you. I'm not going to go off on a tangent. This is relevant, I swear. This morning, so we transport my oldest, his best friend. His best friend is white. And this is relevant to the story. His best friend's white. And he was
Race is relevant to the story?
And he was like, oh, did you know that you can't take pictures of the Eiffel Tower at night? Like, I don't know, kids like to just share little tidbits that they know. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's true. And he was like, yeah, and we had a conversation about how the government, if you have money, and also the government can get away with things, right? I made a comment that like, well, somebody from this K-pop group, I like took a picture of the Eiffel Tower at night, but he has money, so nothing happened to him. And so the child, he's like, yeah, well, I think, you know, the government, they're really powerful. They could probably do it and nothing would happen. But, you know, the government here, they could like nuke something to take care of us, like to help us. And he's like, right? Like asking me if he's right. And I was like, well,
no.
I was like, I think that you think the government cares about us more than the government actually does, right? He's 11, right? I'm trying to, I don't want him to go home and be like, did you know? You know, I don't, but I'm like, I think you care. I think you think the government cares about us more than it does. Enter my 6-year-old.
Yeah.
Derek knows my 6-year-old. Listeners, you may or may not, but Enter my 6-year-old, very radical 6-year-old. And he's like, are you talking about the United States? And the kid says, yeah. And he's like, the United States government killed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Boom.
White kid in the back is like, what? My 11-year-old is like, yeah,
That's
it's
for real.
true.
Yeah.
And so my 6-year-old goes, I hate the government. I'm like, what is, like, it is not even 8 o'clock in the morning, guys. I was like, okay. But because we have conversations with our children, right? Like, even my 11-year-old, he's a little more quiet than my 6-year-old. He's a little more subtle, but he's like, yeah, no, that's true, right? And like, that is something that the United States government, that my 6-year-old hates apparently, is fearful of, right? Of like, oh my God, these children knowing these atrocities that we have committed. Because what do? Kids are always talking. They're in the back seat talking about the U.S. killed Dr. King. The U.S. doesn't care about us. What are you talking about? And if they're going to first grade talking about the United States killed Dr. King, they're going to 6th grade, the United States killed Dr. King. What's next that they're going to learn about? They're going to learn about Black August, right? They're going to learn about like how actually these people probably shouldn't be in prison. You know who should be in prison? The president of the United States should be in prison, right? Not a 17-year-old for stealing $70. Is it easy to co-opt Black August? I think it has been. But I think it is becoming less and less possible to do that because more people are learning. More people, the internet is it's a thing, right? It's a tool to be used. It can be good, it can be bad. And I think being connected to each other, the fact that we can see what's happening in Palestine, right, has like radicalized so many people. Learning, going on Indie Liberation Center and learning about George Jackson, not only learning about George Jackson, but learning that like, oh, he had a book of poetry from a Palestinian freedom fighter. That's amazing. At one point, it was easy to kind of co-opt that and, you know, quote unquote, whitewash it. I don't think that is something that they can continue to do.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. And especially with popular opinion, you know, because and it's interesting that Palestine is like is a contemporary example of that because that is, you know, one of the things that really kind of like was a demarcation point in the left when like that was a breaking point for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. You know, they put out a statement. They were like, they and like, you know, one or two other groups on the left were the only ones who were out there protesting against the, you know, the 6-Day War, right? In 1967, and they lost all their like, you know, white funders. I mean, that was a turning point then, a smaller one, but now it's a larger one because it's like, okay, you're against genocide over there, but you also got to be against genocide over here because it's happening to the Black nation, the New African nation, New African peoples, you know. And if you look up the definition of genocide in the United Nations, it talks about, of course, the physical eradication of people, but it also talks about the forced removal, you know, of children from their families. It talks about the eradication of culture, language, et cetera. And interestingly, it doesn't prioritize them. It doesn't say like, you know, this has to happen and this has to happen. And so you could take that list and, I mean, you know, Ward Churchill does it in a book, Kill the Indian, Save the Man. He looks at Indian boarding schools alone, right, and applies it to the UN Convention on Genocide, which the U.S. didn't sign for like ever, and then backed out of. But you know, he just takes that and he's like, even this, like, forget about the actual like massacring of American Indian people. Just take the boarding schools, and that in itself meets a definition of genocide. And so does what is happening to the Black nation, New African nation, Black people in the United States today. And so I think that's a really great point. Of course, you know, there's many differences, but like we should hone in on the similarities to try to rebuild that internationalism, because I do think you're right that in many ways, you know, national chauvinism is one of the things that continues to hold the movement back, right? Because all of a sudden, like, we're all Americans and, whatever. And if you look at George's writings, I mean, throughout, he was, always thoroughly internationalist. And I love this one letter that he writes. This is in Soledad, Brother. And, he's like repeatedly, talking about the Chinese Revolution and that revolution taking place in Africa. And he praises Julius Nyerere's leadership in Tanzania. And, instead of going to the imperialist West to develop, he went to China. And he writes, quote, "Does it seem stupid of China to lend without interest and build without taking over or capitalizing? Question mark. Must be love," right? He's putting in his letter, to somebody to try to, like, get them on the side of internationalism, because the United States is, trying to be like, okay, no, like, we're not the enemy is over there, right? And in reality, the enemy is right here.
Mm-hmm. That just reminded me, I know I've referenced this before, but again, it reminds me, and also I just went to his museum, Muhammad Ali, who dedicated his life to peace, right? Of course, Muhammad Ali was an amazing boxer, right? Like, of course, but like, he dedicated most of his life to peace and to internationalism. And right, and like, that was one of the things when he was boxing that he, like, right, you're my enemy, right? Like, you won't even fight for my freedom here, but you want me to go across the world and kill brown people and say that they're my enemy. Mm-hmm. Like, when you really sit down, which is why they don't really teach, they're starting to, but they don't really teach, like, how to sit down and examine information that is given to you in, elementary school or whatever. But, like, when you really sit down and examine what is being said to you and trying to conceptualize it, like, how does that make sense? That, like, my enemy is across the world, and yet, like, people don't have food, people don't have clean water, people, like, in this country, right? Right. People are being thrown in the backs of vans, kidnapped, and taken to countries that they've never been to before, or they don't remember ever being. You are killing Black people in the streets still to this day. Like, Vernon is still imprisoned for a crime that he did not commit, right? Like, but I'm supposed to believe that, like, Hamas is my enemy?
Right.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Like, that's wild. I think for a lot of people, talking about Black August and, like, this concept, especially Black people, this concept of, well, I'm going to say African Americans, which is not usually a term I use, but, like, that is my culture, so that's what I'm going to speak to. I have this concept of, like, if you go to jail or, like, like, you're a bad person, like, this concept of, like, honestly, I don't really know too many bad people who go to prison.
Except for the guards.
Except for the guards. That's fair.
We probably don't know too many guards. So.
That's fair. I don't know any guards. But, like, right, I don't know many bad people who go to prison. I know a lot of people who were in difficult situations that go to prison. I know a lot of people who made, like, some mistakes that go to prison. But, like, again, Donald Trump is not in prison. Like, Elon Musk is not in prison.
George W. Bush.
Not in prison. Like, these are bad people, to, like, sound like my 6-year-old again. Like, but, like, these are bad people, right? I hate the government. But, like, I want to read this quote from Angela Davis. So, there is a distinct and qualitative difference between one breaking a law for one's own individual self-interest and violating it in the interest of a class of people whose oppression is expressed either directly or indirectly through that particular law. The former might be called criminal, though in many instances he is a victim, but the latter, as a reformist or revolutionary, is interested in universal social change. Captured, he or she is a political prisoner. In this country, however, where the special category of political prisoners is not officially acknowledged, the political prisoner inevitably stands trial for a specific criminal offense, not for a political act, right? That's just what Derek was talking about with George Jackson, right? In all instances, however, the political prisoner has violated the unwritten law which prohibits disturbances and upheavals and the status quo of exploitation and racism. We can sit here and say that undocumented immigrants are not political prisoners, right? Because they're in detention for being undocumented, allegedly. But these are political prisoners, right? Like, this is a political statement that is being made. Like, these people are going to be detained for, I'm not supposed to cuss on here. They're being detained for stuff that's made up. They're being detained because a lot of people, I think it's in New York, I believe, there's been people who have been like detained, and then they get to the detention center and they're like, yeah, here's my ID. And they're like, oh, okay, you're free to go, whatever. Like, these are political prisoners. And so I want to make that distinction, even though in the United States there are no quote unquote political prisoners, right? These people are being, just as Angela was saying in this document, or in this address that she gave to people, these people are being detained as a way of oppressing them, right? It's not even necessarily for a particular law. It's not even for something that actually the United States actually cares about, right? Like, the United States doesn't actually care about undocumented people or people being here undocumented, right? This is all a power move.
Yeah, and so that's why we're going to be continuing to, hold up Black August, continue the fight for political prisoners. I mean, as well as prisoners of war, as we might call them, right? Those who are arrested for their political activities, and then politicized prisoners, as well as all, Black and African people in the United States and across the world, who, we all have the same common enemy. George Jackson in Blood in My Eye wrote about unity, right? And he's like, unity isn't a thing, it's a process. You got to build it, right? And so that, that means that it's difficult work, but it's going to take all of us, and, none of us are free until all of us are free. That's something that, George Jackson, believed, and that's something that, is in the New African Creed and the Declaration of a Republic of New Africa. It's something that's like very deep in the revolutionary Black tradition, not the one that was, formed by the Ford Foundation and all of these, other nonprofits and government think tanks, basically, that have tried to, and have had some success, infiltrating and like really defanging the movement. And so can you talk about any events that are upcoming here that our listeners should be on the lookout for?
Absolutely. So next week, August 19th, which is 1 week from when we're recording this, so next Tuesday, will be the premiere of Soul in Exile, which is the Shaka Shakur documentary. So this is going to be, I want to say, Derek, correct me if I'm wrong, this is like, we're hoping to have this be a world premiere, right? Like, not just in the United States. We're trying to show this multiple different countries because, again, internationalism. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so we're going to be hosting like a satellite watch parties throughout the country and hopefully throughout the world. Awesome. And I know at least our Korean comrades in Japan will be watching it, and probably some comrades in China, as well as comrades here and on the East, West Coast, et cetera. Absolutely. And hopefully all of y'all will join us in that. Again, we will definitely be having that here at the Indie Liberation Center. If we didn't, I'm pretty sure Jocko would yell at all of us, but we're going to have it here at the Indie Liberation Center, 1800 North Meridian. In addition to that, we are going to have pre-orders that will be available for Shaka A. Shakur's first book, Manifestations of Thought, The Cipher, When the Dragon Comes, Selected Prison Writings, edited by Comrade Derek. I don't know if y'all know him, but and Tessa Crockett. And with an introduction by Haki Kweli Shakur. It'll be coming out through 1804 Books, so be on the lookout to get your copy and for the book launch. All right, y'all, so that is it for this special episode of Naptown People's Radio. If you found today's discussion useful, pass it on, leave a comment, and listen for our next episode to drop. Support us at support.pslindianapolis.org and by shopping at indieliberationcenter.org/store. If you have a suggestion for this show, you can email us at producer@naptownpeoplesradio.com. The road ahead is long, but we walk it together. Study with your comrades, build with your community, and always remember, theory without action is paralysis, but action without theory is chaos. Once again, I'm your host, Dani Abdullah, here with my co-host,
Derek Ford.
Stay dangerous, stay disciplined, and stay in the struggle.
We trying to create a movement. We got a chance to do something in Indiana that brothers like myself been talking about for the last 40 years. When I first became political and we was organized behind the walls in the 80s and 90s, some of the stuff that we doing now with the different programs and the different institutions that we have and things like the Indy Center is things that we used to talk about and dream about doing. And now we doing them. See what I'm saying? We doing it. And we got to keep that momentum going. And it's also generation. So as the next generation come up, you know what I'm saying? It's on y'all to take it to the next level and take it to the next stage.
Salute.